Hello, Waddlers. Welcome back to the podcast. This is Silly Goose. I'm your host, Kaylee, and today we're doing a little bit of a Star Wars thing. This is actually the first podcast of Silly Goose that I'm recording, but it'll be the third one in the series when I release this summer. So I'm excited to start this journey with you today, talking about leading with care, adaptive youth ministry in Lower Fairfield County. Hopefully, by now you've gotten to know me a little bit so we can dive into the really good stuff. I'm excited to tell you a little bit today about an exciting continuing education program that I've been a part of for the last 9 or so months. We started in October, and that is the Yale Divinity School Certificate in Youth Ministry Leadership. This was a program envisioned and started by Reverend Jill Olds, who is the director of the Yale Youth Ministry Institute, and the class is co-led with Reverend Jairicus Collins. I am thankful to be a part of the first class of students in this certificate. And so, as Jill lovingly called us the guinea pigs, we have been exploring this program and curriculum together for the first time alongside our colleagues and our teachers, which is personally a really exciting thing to be a part of. Kind of always I'm always itching to try something new, and so to be able to learn from Jill in this way and to have some experience by other Yale Divinity professors and contributors from the Yale Youth Ministry Institute, especially with Jairicus and other classmates. It's been a really interesting trimester and especially year. So I'm excited to walk you through a little bit all about what we're going to talk through today. So we may make it to all of these points, we may make it to none of these points, but we'll see where the Holy Spirit guides us. I've got water next to me, and hopefully you do too. If this is your car ride for the day, I hope I don't put you to sleep, but please be safe, and I hope all of you are staying safe, especially in this season of life that we are in. So today we're going to explore three big things. How can we apply what I've learned this semester to build a more adaptive, inclusive, and mentally healthy youth ministry in Lower Fairfield County? We're going to walk through the importance of continuous learning in youth ministry and how this semester's insights have shaped my leadership approach. And maybe I've got a personal story of what inspired this conversation. Framing our discussion, we're going to talk about the intersections of faith, leadership, and mental health in youth ministry, understand or try to understand why young people are struggling today and how the church can better serve them, and some big questions that I'm thinking of. How can we better support youth mental health? How do we lead in a way that fosters growth and resilience? How do we create safe, inclusive, and meaningful faith experiences? Well, let's tackle this a bit at a time rather than trying for the whole elephant. Some key insights from the first part of the semester that really stuck with me was the impact on the digital age of youth ministry today, especially post the COVID-19 pandemic. There's an increased social comparison and a higher pressure to perform. Even when I was a teenager, not that incredibly long ago, um, we are seeing even today the increased want and need to fit in, to have this and have that, and there's so much there that goes on to understanding the higher rates that youth are experiencing of anxiety, depression, and loneliness, despite being the most digitally connected generation in our entire existence. They simultaneously are connected to thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people through media and online connections, yet are experiencing the highest rates of recorded loneliness in recent time. I think, truthfully, from what I remember, it was the highest ever recorded rates of loneliness in youth and young people. And understanding the role of faith communities in addressing these struggles. A part of that is trying to understand how religion can help or really hurt mental health challenges. Faith and spirituality, we know, can provide strength, community, and meaning. But for some, and might I say even many, religious spaces have been a source of guilt, shame, and exclusion, especially for queer youth and youth of color. Later on in our program, we went to explore the role of a youth leader in these mental health struggles that our youth are exploring. And one piece that not only I've known, but I want to continue to share unto thee is we are not therapists. Might I say again, we are not therapists, but we are, in fact, trusted mentors. Our responsibility as youth leaders are to recognize the warning signs, if we can, of mental health struggles, knowing when and how to refer youth to professional help, and to create brave spaces where youth feel comfortable expressing ourselves. All of this learning I'm thinking about in context to my particular wonderful gig of being the director of regional youth ministry in Lower Fairfield County. I find, and the clergy in our area find, that here there's a cultural lack of need, seemingly, for faith. When you live in one of the top 10 wealthiest counties in the country, everything can be provided in some way or another. And so, what need is there for this hypothetical God that can't do anything for you tangibly, that money can't provide? And why do you really need to pull this faith box out if it does nothing for you that you can't source yourself? And so, we find that this really bleeds into our youth, and even when there's a social, might I say, especially I'm finding, even on my own, might I say, For You page of TikTok, that there's a heightened increase of stigma, of mental health, of challenges, of neurodiversity. There is simultaneously still the unspoken, dare I even say, older generation that doesn't either A, think that mental health exists, which I still struggle to understand, but there is still a big stigma. I keep using that word, but really around here, that's the best descriptor for the lack of understanding, need for helping approach caring about mental health in very little ways. And so this really says to me, as a youth leader in my specific role, is that there's a big, big need for open and judgment free conversations about mental health in youth group. And one of my favorite ways of doing this is, we don't do it in a group because I don't feel like that's the appropriate way of doing it, but as often youth will come to say bye to me as I'm leaving for an event, or as they're leaving from an event to go home or wherever they're going, I will get an opportunity to say to them, what do I say? How are you taking care of yourself this week? Hey, how are you taking care of yourself this week? And so I had a really sweet conversation with one of our youth recently, who I asked this question at the end of one of our events. And she goes, "Oh, it's scheduled in my calendar. Don't worry about it." And I loved that she not only had become accustomed to me asking that question of, "Hey, how are you taking care of yourself?" But she was prepared for the answer, and she had already been doing it, or at least planned to do it. Now, maybe she pulled it out of her back pocket, and I anticipate that 97% of kids are just giving me some bluff. But the way that she spoke about it really made me feel as if she is now. And maybe this is as she gets older, and she has an incredible family, so I take no full credit for this, but the fact that she anticipated and knew that that was something that we talk about at youth group, that we check in and ask, how are you taking care of yourself this week? And be that physically or mentally, however that best applies for the student. I loved hearing her response was so natural, it was right there because I asked that question and she knew the answer, and hopefully in time this changes a greater, maybe internal piece of even how one youth thinks about their own mental health and taking care of themselves. So hopefully we're teaching youth that in time there's can be a mutual understanding that mental health and spiritual health not only can coexist but may actually go hand in hand together. Some research that got me really intrigued into this program was Dr. Lisa Miller's what's her book, the Awakened Brain. Her first one is The Spiritual Child. The second one that I read is The Awakened Brain, and she maps physically the location and to her belief scientifically proves that mental health and spirituality, the place in your brain where mental health and spirituality literally reside, the location, like where language and where vision, let's say, are mapped in your brain, dreaming XYZ. She believes that these spots, not only are they the same, but they benefit and actually can make each other better and or worse. Without spirituality, there's a heightened chance for mental health struggles, but with a heightened sense of spirituality, there's a barrier built to mental health struggles. And so teaching with our youth that these two can actually be ways to faith can be a way of, in fact, taking care of yourself. And some of the practical ways that we are striving to do this is partnering with local mental health professionals and faith leaders that provide this kind of support. We have one incredible partner who is an ordained pastor, is one of our partnering churches, and she's a licensed social worker. So we just have this powerhouse of a resource in our covenanted partner that she brings her youth group kids there, and she brings her experience in school and life and work with all that she does to be an available resource and to be in relationship with our youth. And hopefully in time, this ripple effect starts with the inner recognition of need for self-care unprompted, and then ripples out through the many beautiful ways that things like self-care can do. Now, I say all of this with one really big asterisk in the air, and that's that none of this work would be possible without A, relationships and really intentional relational ministry, but also what I've in the semester come to learn is the term adaptive leadership. Now, I learned adaptive leadership to be the difference between technical problems and adaptive challenges. Kind of pulling stuff and doing things on the fly, as youth ministers are often so wonderful at doing. We joke that we've got plan A, B, C, and down through Z. If any, if anything is to happen, we are always in an air of being prepared. And this kind of leadership is not about having all the answers, but about guiding change, and resistance to this change, truthfully, is not only normal, but should be an expected factor that leaders must manage wisely. In fact, when we create space for experimentation rather than relying on rigid models, for me, rigid models of what youth ministry has and should be, it's now that our programs and events and relationships and communities have begun to really flourish, because there, at every corner, is a technical problem, or there's a kid in crisis, or there's a package that you need for that youth event that isn't going to be here on time. We who do this work have heard and done it all. And part of doing that all is recognizing, most of all, when change is needed. That, for me, is a, a, a model, in fact, of which I rely on in my ministry, and I'm lovingly and sometimes jokingly and sometimes not jokingly ref- known for, is that, especially in my role here, is we try things on a one semester basis. And if it doesn't work for us, and if it doesn't serve our needs, I am wiping my hands and we will see you later. No worries, no fuss, no muss. Because what is more important than a hypothetical structure that was once relied on? And I say this knowing that there's a thin line between that statement and tradition, but when there is simply a model for the sake of, well, that once worked, then to say that that must work for us today and refuse any other answer to that is the reason that our youth ministries have been failing over the last 20 plus years. This is partially why I truly believe that youth ministry should be relationship driven and not just event driven. Though I had this conversation with my associate pastor the other day. An interesting way to think of events is that, at least for us in our community, events are the first step for a youth to become involved in RYM and for us to start building relationship with them. Uh, Another large aspect of the model of ministry that we follow is going out in the community as much as possible. So going to sporting events and band concerts and choir pop-ups and shifts at the bread shop. And so this, for us, begins at an event, although that does not mean that our programs are event driven. It's simply that the events are a gateway, are a way to facilitate relationship. And it's in those big events when many youth get together that we, as adaptive leaders, really get to listen, observe, and adjust our strategies based on the real time needs of Micah in the corner, who is not vibing well with what's going on. Or maybe there's a way to get Lauren involved, who doesn't really love games but so clearly wants to be involved. So she started, this actually happened this evening. She started going around the table, where we were sitting on the floor playing games. It was our makeshift table. And while we were playing spoons, she wanted to go around and look at everyone's cards and like keep up with the game and see if she could like figure out who was gonna win spoons before everybody else could. And so this way of getting her involved is something that I've figured out solely through being an youth minister for 8+ years now. My next big dream and step for RYM that I'm really excited about, and I am, as I'm editing this podcast, I'm finding myself realizing how much I say the word excited. And as cheesy as that sounds, it truly is an incredible feeling to genuinely feel that way about not only what I'm learning, but truly the work that I'm doing. I wake up each day looking forward to my youth ministry role and my children's roles in so many ways that I find this work so deeply life-giving and awe-inspiring and excitement given, and I'm just happy to be able to claim that in this time. And speaking of which is a really beautiful segue to either the point that I was fixing to make or the point that I was wanting to make. And that's all about my dream of having youth leadership as a part of regional youth ministry. From the beginning, have I hoped that this effort would be led, the term that we use is by youth for youth. So this is, for us, looked like me proposing a few ideas, which at the very beginning was kind of where we started with this, and saying, okay, guys, what do you think? A couple people voting on this, a couple people voting on that, and we just we did what was the most popular thing, and that's how we did food, and that's like when we were trying to figure out locations for the best things in the first couple of months, we still did it on a little survey system. And now many of our events have come out of those first, there where someone said, "Oh, wouldn't it be cool if we did blank?" And so I asked them a little more about it, and I asked the rest of the group, "What do you think about this?" And if it's a really big thing that needs to be scheduled, then I'll get some info on. One youth who really wants to go says they really can't do this date, and so what's this is hopefully leading to is my dream of a youth advisory council. And I was having a conversation with one of our youth a couple of weeks ago who said that they really wanted to start to be able to be involved in leadership in some way. Now, these are not words that I have said or used with our youth. I wanted that seed to come from within and wait to see who was going to ask for that kind of opportunity. And so now that we've got this kind of ball rolling, I see the snowball is finally starting to build up a little. My hope is this formal youth advisory council, and I say formal in that it's a structure that is written down somewhere and someone can ask about it and I can give them something with information on it. And the the goal of this committee or council or whatever would be so that youth who really have a wish and a want to be specifically involved in regional youth ministry have a way to help guide the conversation of what activism roles we want to play in our community, what kinds of events that we want to do, what places we want to go visit, what mission organizations they care about, really giving youth a formal-ish platform to directly influence the happenings of regional youth ministry, which is then even further, hopefully, supported by what is the advisory council, simply just without, so hypothetically, in comparison, it's the youth advisory council, but it's the partner lady representatives of the covenanted churches that build up the partnership of regional youth ministry. So RYM is a network of congregations and hopefully one day nonprofit partners that come together to pool resources to make ministry possible for the greater community. And so the idea is that the Youth Advisory Council would meet, come up with hopes, dreams, and wants, and then the Advisory Council would find ways to facilitate this and make it happen and do the nitty gritty and schedule things and get forms and all that good jazz. But really, that it's led by youth, facilitated by partners for the greater community. Now, truth be told, this is not all as easy as maybe I like to make it seem. And I say like only because I truly love my work and don't want to air a negative view of my role in what's potentially such a public lens. But to everything that is good, there is hard. To know love is to know struggle, and struggle benefits and allows us to further understand love and God. And so there are always going to be sore points with clergy, parents, and even youth themselves on what exactly RYM should be, or what should be done, or what even I ought to be doing. But something that I said in one of my final interviews before starting this role was to Reverend Max Grant, and he asked what's something along the lines of, he said, what's an important factor to making this work possible? And I said that that for me is trust, especially trust between the clergy and hopefully then trust between me and the various congregations that I work with. The concept that we're going for this regional youth ministry effort is hypothetical up until 18 months ago. We began and started offering youth ministry in some congregations for the first time in 5+ years. And with that comes a deep desire to offer any sort of youth ministry for the students that these congregations have raised and grown up with and now want any kind of programming for them. And this led us to welcoming our first RYM partner rather than in 2 to 3 years' time, like we first imagined, was within a year of offering our first ever RYM event. We welcomed our second partner in less than 18 months of me being here. And this particular recognition of knowing how deeply and desperately these congregations and clergy want to provide youth ministry for youth also provides spaces for expectations to both be fulfilled and underfulfilled, truthfully. No individual and congregation is going to get exactly out of RYM or out of any pastor or church that they are exactly looking for. And one part of being a youth minister, especially in my dynamic, is managing these blisters that occasionally form between RYM and an individual's expectations of RYM. One really beautiful aspect, or that's probably the seventh really beautiful aspect I've said about this, is the obviously the nature of which we come together is under shared want for youth ministry, but also in shared covenant. So we have a really beautiful covenant that my associate pastor and I and many, many others have spent time really intentionally discerning how do we bring together X many potential churches and X many potential partners with similar core values. We are open and affirming, anti-racist. We believe in interfaith and intergenerational work, and we believe in being trauma informed. And that was another really key aspect that we learned about this trimester. Trauma isn't just about single events. It includes ongoing life experiences like racism, discrimination, family, instability, or struggles with identity. The lasting effects of the pandemic and isolation have only increased anxiety. All of this with the church's role in either helping or hurting our young people. In my area and in our youth group, we have few people of color and few individuals who have shared with us that they are part of the queer community or marginalized in other ways. And this to me speaks of a unique need for especially honoring and recognizing what the church ought to be saying, doing, and being in this time in our world. One thing that I'm particularly considerate of, or maybe considerate is too strong of a word because maybe that's being too hopeful. One thing that I would like to be furthermore considerate of, and that I am at least intentionally thoughtful of, is the amount, and I say this as a white person, but the amount of white people in this town, the amount of cis people in this town, and how few youth of color, youth of our community, or youth of other marginalized communities there are in our youth group. I think we carry a responsibility in our town. If we're going to say that we're going to be this bold youth group who does things a little differently and questions and is willing to break down the ways of old, might one say, and what it means to be a person of faith and a youth group today, then I think we also really ought to be questioning what it means to stand up for racism and for queer rights and for education rights and for the rights of those with special needs, and that we should be making strides to move away from purity culture and shame-based teachings about our bodies rather than trying to fix youth. My hope and prayer is that we are walking alongside our youth in their struggles, that we are then advocating for them, with them, on behalf of them in any ways that we need to, I don't know how else to say this, to do what we have said we are set out to do. What kind of statement are we going to make if we don't follow it up with action? And what kind of ministry, if we're going to do this relationally, should this be led by and imposed by the youth minister? Now, obviously, direction and input and say and reason and all these beautiful things that we have youth ministers for. But if we're going to say all of these powerful words, then we really ought, we got to do something about it. And I don't think that God is calling us to tell our youth what they need to be doing. We've done that for a long time. Now I think the call is to listen to our youth and to then do what they actually say and to hear their discernment and to validate it just as much as we validate our own discernment and our own call as youth pastors. I may have talked about this earlier, but truth be told, if you were my dearest friend sitting on the couch across from me, you probably too will hear the same point brought up 3 or 4 different times in 3 or 4 different ways. But none of this work that I talk about and none of these experiences that I've had or these dreams that I dream are remotely possible without the building of brave space instead of just safe space, where difficult conversations can happen. Offering inclusive programming that meets youth where they are is vital in our approach to creating this kind of relationship with youth. We are all about creating a culture of radical welcome and belonging. The last part of our trimester it was 2025, in 2025, the last part of our trimester this year was all about rest, resilience, and sustainable ministry, not only for us as youth leaders, but for youth as well. We read in class, and again, I find even more so in my area that many youth are feeling the pressure to always be quote unquote on, whether it's in school, in social media, or even in faith communities. Youth today are expected to always be, actually, funny enough, I was hearing this in the van today, expected to always talk smart, to always talk right, to stand up when spoken to make eye contact, to shake the hand of the stranger that you're being told to introduce yourself to. And I don't know about you, but that's exhausting for me. I do that on a Sunday morning and I need a nap halfway through the day. Rest isn't a luxury. It's, in fact, a spiritual discipline. And truth be told, one that I'm not fantastic at. And really valued the reminder of this, that if if I'm going to say in this very same podcast that covenants are ways and boundaries that God holds with us to showcase love in the truest form, then does equally allowing for rest potentially even as much as we give time for deep joy, a necessity. God gave us these 10, the commandments, and chose for one of those to be the reminder, the blatant, hey idiot, yo, look, that our bodies physically rely on rest to flourish. It's still medically unexplained actually why we sleep. We only know that we have to, and we know the seriousness of what can happen if we don't sleep. But if doctors can't explain it, and I say that as a person who nearly went into physics as a full person of scientific belief, but it's it causes me to pause and invite God into the question when it's both honored as in the Ten Commandments and both recognized as a mystery by the medical community. How deeply rooted rest must be in our everyday experience. Again, saying how not fantastic I am at this. In fact, if we teach our young people that Sabbath is actually a form of resistance, imagine how we might rise together against a culture of burnout. Oh, I love that thought. Imagine if Sabbath was viewed as a resistance to the culture of burnout. Oh, cool idea. I love that. I love that. What am I trying to say here? Especially today in such a world where there's deep commercialism and a strive for more and more and more, as I spoke about, that we might even be able to engage the conversation of rest and spirituality together with our youth as a form of advocacy, as a form of activism. That if we invite our youth to say, hey, you want something to do about this? Slow down. See how much that makes the world angry. See how much people might think and notice if you simply don't give in to the fast pace of life. Even at the age of 13, that's an interesting doorway that as I'm exploring, as I'm talking with you now, I'm curious how I might explore that more with my youth. Oh, I like that a lot. I like that a lot. I hope with this door cracked to slowing down that there might be a widening for God to enter into the conversation as time and relationships with our youth build. Oh, I'm really loving this. So I'm thinking about the practical, like, how do I actually do that? And so one way that we structure our events is once a month we do a service event, and once a month we do like a fun get together kind of thing. And I wonder if we, in these events, further try doing some of those kind of slowing activities. We've done yoga before, but I am not a yoga instructor. Fun fact. um, but it was really enjoyed by the youth that attended. And so I wonder if further activities like that the might be the event that invites the conversation to viewing rest as a form of activism that then in time invites God into the relational conversation. And so that is my recap, and probably way more brain vomit than you potentially ever signed up for. But if you're here, then thanks for journeying along. I have really enjoyed our conversation talking about the importance of combining mental health awareness, adaptive leadership, and inclusive ministry, sharing that youth ministry isn't just about big and flashy things that have programs or even events that have wicked high numbers. It's about belonging, transformation, and the capability for empowerment. Upcoming RYM initiatives and events that reflect these lessons really excite me. There we go again. Someone make a tally box. That's maybe what I'll do post edit. See how many times I've said the word excite or excitement. I'm also encouraged for youth leaders, parents, and clergy to engage with the conversation of youth, mental health, spiritual care, deep rest, and the question of what if we tried it all completely different? And what's the worst that could happen? Maybe we serve our youth in ways that we never dreamed of. And maybe God does things that we never anticipated because we never gave God the chance. Waddlers, I'd love for you to engage with us. What's one change that you would like to see in your youth ministry? I'd love for you to respond via social media or even through email. Check us out at sillygm.org or just say a little prayer and know that we are connected by the same loving God that knows you. And thanks be to thee that was a part of this entire conversation. If you will, I'm going to say a quick prayer for wherever you are in time or space. And then I will see you next time on the Silly Goose podcast. Dear God, thank you for this holy and chaotic, wonderful space that you invited me to hold. Maybe this is a big way of having those conversations with you that I have a hard time slowing down for myself. Thank you for this Yale program, and thank you for all that you have revealed through discernment and prayer and time in your presence. God, you are good, and may your goodness extend to whoever hears these words. May they feel encouraged. May they know that I too am journeying this beautiful, messy, incredible walk of youth ministry alongside them, wherever they go in this lifetime or the next. I give you thanks, O God, for all that you can be, for all that you may do, and for all that I have yet to encounter. You are powerful and great, Almighty God. Amen. Bye, guys.